welcome to the latest in our series of videos, How to Campaign, whether you're a first-time candidate or you've been at it a few years. Someone who has been at it a few years, Justin Tomlinson, in the nicest possible way, from Conservative Print, former Member of Parliament for North Swindon. We're talking about canvassing in this video, Justin. Let's start with the very basics. What is canvassing?
Well, first of all, there's two styles of canvassing. There's traditional canvassing, and then there is the 0 to 10 canvassing. Now, 0 to 10 is where you would follow a script and ask quite specific, detailed questions to gather quite a lot of data, which can then be used for targeting further down the line. That is often promoted by central office as best practice. But there's also traditional canvassing where you would be, I would say, a little bit more natural, allow the conversation to flow. So, for example, I am calling on behalf of X. Are there any local or national issues? You then have that discussion, and then after that discussion you would then ask which party would you normally vote for, and then you're gathering the voting intention data.
And that's really important, isn't it? Because canvassing has two main purposes. Just getting yourself out there as the candidate on people's doorsteps, but getting that all-important voter intention data. People are sometimes nervous as candidates, especially novices. How do you go about asking that question?
So the first bit, you're right, it's about getting known, and it's more than that. It's getting known, it's presenting yourself to try and help on local issues, which then builds up that personal vote. And it's also about identifying the issues, which then makes for better leaflets as part of your campaign. Because if you're talking about the issues that are of interest or of concern to local residents, then you are more likely to get that engagement, that level of personal support that can just get you over the line in those tight elections. The second element around collecting the data, yes, absolutely. So you are, in effect, looking to identify who are your supporters and who aren't your supporters. So when you come to those final days of the campaign and you're sort of trying to get out your vote, particularly in local elections or local by-elections where turnouts are very low, so you just need to find those people willing to take that journey down to the polling station. You can then spend your limited amount of time talking to the right people to try and get them out. Now, in terms of being able to do that, you just ask. You ask people, and most people will give you an idea. They will say, yeah, normally I would support you, or perhaps I'm not a traditional supporter of yours, but I am impressed with your campaign on the following issue, and therefore I could be persuaded. And these are the sorts of people that you can then try and then get them over the line. And if people don't want to tell you, that's perfectly fine, and you thank them and you move on to the next door.
Right, some quick fire ones before we talk to someone who can prove that canvassing works, if you like. When you are on someone's doorstep, do you argue with them if they express an opinion that you don't agree with?
No, you don't. We live in a democracy, not everybody's going to be sort of get out the bunting when you've turned up on their doorsteps. It's important to listen to the issues, to reflect on those issues and say, are these the issues that we are campaigning on? Should we be campaigning on? Could we do more in that area to try and build up that level of support? And often it's the quickest way to find something,
yeah.
And then you can then go and make a tangible difference.
At what stage of a campaign do you start the canvassing process?
You should be campaigning all year round, and wherever, a little bit often soon adds up. And the number of people will go out, and they may have 50 conversations and say, well, there's 10,000 houses in my ward or 5,000 houses in my ward, that's hardly made any difference. Maybe so, but do that 10 times and suddenly it has made a difference. And starting early means there's less to do. The number of people sort of panic at last minute and try and run round. Try and do a bit and do it often. And when the nights are light, take advantage.
Yeah, and a final one in the quickfire round. As a team or individually?
So in an ideal world, in your utopian world, you go out as a team. The board holder's the most important person because they make sure they give you the information that you need.
We should explain perhaps what that is. That's literally the person who holds the clipboard.
So they would. That's with the traditional canvas sheets that you've printed out. It's got any information that we've previously gathered in terms of who we think they might vote for based on our previous conversations, how often they vote, are they postal voters. That's the sort of thing a board holder can let you know before you knock on the door. You then have that conversation. If you get a wildly different answer, you might want to say, well, is that always the case? And they might say, well, I was your supporter, but in 2024 I wasn't. And so that bears out. And then, so in an ideal world, you've got a team, but we recognise, not all associations are overwhelmed with people going to do it. So I've spent many hours going out on my own, but I'm an experienced canvasser, so whatever works for you. We also suggest partnering up. So where you've got limited resources, if you're a candidate in one ward, you might work with a neighbouring ward. Go together, do one ward in the morning, do the other ward in an afternoon, nice lunch break in the middle. So whatever suits, but a bit often soon adds up.
Great. Well, someone who is living proof that canvassing works, we're going to have a chat to now. Well, now let's have a chat to Councillor Daniel Adams, someone who knows a thing or two about canvassing. Won his seat at Swindon Borough Council in the St Andrews ward, where they used to have a really, really good councillor not so many years ago called Peter Heaton-Jones, just saying. But Daniel won in 2024 against the run of form. And Daniel, welcome. How much did canvassing play a part in your victory, do you reckon?
It was absolutely the difference between winning and losing. It's without a shadow of a doubt that if I hadn't been out there canvassing as much as I had been using the skills that I'd learned, it wouldn't have been a win. It really is, in hard years like that, really the key difference between winning and losing.
What's the key timescale for canvassing? How soon do you start before election day?
Second you're selected as a candidate, if not earlier. No one wants somebody knocking on their door 6 weeks before an election saying that they care about the area when you've never seen this person before. It really is a case of getting your name and recognition out there early. The earlier the better, but having said that, just because you've missed the early slot, keep on plugging at it because it really is important.
Yeah, and what's important also, you've just mentioned it, it's not just about going and picking up data and picking up people's voting intentions, it's just getting yourself on their doorstep, in their eye line, so that they know who you are and what you look like and you're being active.
I mean, absolutely. The data's important, and it is important that we have that, especially for the 6 weeks election period when there isn't much time. But the reality is, if you have seen somebody 2 or 3 times over the last 6 months, they recognise you. And when they're stood in that booth, ultimately not sure which way to vote, they'll remember who they've seen on their doorstep. And especially if you've been there a couple of times, putting a name to a face really does make a difference.
So on a practical level, Daniel, what do you say? You knock on the door, person answers the door. What's your opening line to them?
So I always introduce myself with my name. The more times that you can get them to see your name either written down on a leaflet, hearing it in the local news, seeing it on their doorstep, the more likely they are to remember you and vote for you ultimately on the election day. Moving on from introducing yourself with your name, it's really just important to make them aware that you're there to help them, and just offer your help for anything there is that any issues that may be having locally.
Now, Justin was there with you during the canvassing. What's he like? Is he good at it?
No, it's very, very good. And the key point I think that Daniel's got across there is the fact that you're seen all of the time. So Daniel is seen as somebody who genuinely cares about his community, who gets things done. And those were a really, really difficult set of local elections that year. We lost, over 1,000 Conservative councillors, some incredibly experienced, good councillors. And I was with him in the polling station in the last couple of hours of the day. And the number of people who came up to Daniel and said, I'm not thrilled with your party, but fair play to you, and I'm going to give you another chance to carry on. And he bucked the trend, and that is on the back of hard work and having that ability to just go and have a normal conversation with people on the doors, identify the issues, take action on them to show that he is making a total difference. And it was enough, just enough, and it was close. We know from that count how close that was.
150.
That's pretty close. We're going to talk about getting out the vote in another video, but Daniel, how important is the collection of the data that you do in the run-up to polling day in running an effective GOTV campaign?
No, absolutely. And this is why it's important to spend as much time as possible out before those 6 weeks, because those 6 weeks that you have, they go quickly. You really do at that point need to be focusing on the people that you think are on the fence. You know who's going to vote for you, you know who's not going to vote for you, but you really do want to find those people that are really on the fence, knock on their doors again in those last few weeks. And without the data backing you up, you just don't know where you're going. You'll lose so much time walking the streets for votes that just aren't there. You really do need that data especially in those last few weeks, to really help you target your precious time. And it is precious because it soon disappears.
And on a practical level, a lot of new first-time candidates are nervous about knocking on someone's door. Frankly, they're worried about either getting insulted or having the door slammed in their face, or these days, sadly, worse. What would you say to someone, a first-time candidate, walking up their first driveway? What do they do?
Just be genuine with people. If you don't know an answer, don't try and blag it. More often than not, they will be able to tell, and you ultimately will lose that person's vote. I've heard from doors that I've knocked on where people have told me that my opponent's canvas team have been knocking on their door and they could see straight through their lies. And they do. So you need to be honest. If you don't know an answer to a question, thank them for the question, invite them to email you, and you will get back to them with a pertinent response. But again, that's another reason you need to be out there for the months before an election, because by that point you should hopefully know what your local issues are. And if you don't have an answer for them, at least say, this is something that we want to work on in the future. Support me and we'll try and sort this issue out for you.
And that, I have to say, that's really important because it's often local questions. So people will be asking for an update on a planning application, update on some works in the local area. And so your ability to be able to provide that information either on the door at the time or in a follow-up email, again, really does make a difference.
And Daniel, when it comes to asking someone's voting intention, how are you going to vote at the next election? A lot of people still regard that as a private matter, not to be discussed with you. How much do you push it? If someone says to you, I'm not sure I want to tell you, do you give them a second chance or do you take that politely and walk away?
I think it's a balance, and it really does come down to a certain situation. Usually you can get a good indication that they don't want to tell you because it is a secret for them, and that's absolutely perfectly fine. And if they say that, you need to be clear with them. Look, that's fine, it's personal information, and leave it at that. I feel that there is a scope to push if you feel feel comfortable doing so, but the reality is that it is quite personal information for a lot of people. So I find not pushing to be the best strategy in that case, because ultimately we're there for two reasons: one, to get the data, and two, to get your face out there. And if you end up getting their backs up over something as silly as that, it's a wasted opportunity, really.
And question for both of you, actually. If you've got limited resources, as in not too many boots on the ground, how do you choose which roads you're going to go and canvass? Do you do the ones where you know you've probably got some votes, or do you choose the ones where you think you're going to switch most people? How do you make those decisions?
I mean, for me personally, I think it can be a difficult question, because sometimes you do feel like you need the pick-me-up, so you'll go to a road that you do quite like and you know is quite good. And we're all guilty of that sometimes, I think. But you do, at the end of the day, need to go into those more difficult areas. And, and truth be told, the more you go into them, the less difficult they become. Because I've had many Labour and other party supporters say to me, you know what, you're the only one that's knocked on my door. I see you out and about and I'll go and vote for you. At the end of the day, in a real crunch year, the core vote may not necessarily get you over the line, and you need people to switch. And that means going into those difficult areas that you may not be so comfortable doing. So yeah, really, it is a must, in my opinion.
I used to call it vanity canvassing.
Yeah.
When you go to roads where you know you're going to get lots of voters say that they love you, but in the end, that's no good, really.
But, well, it depends, first of all, where you are in the electoral cycle. So when you're riding high in the polls, so in the 2019 general election, we spent a huge amount of time canvassing on our traditional areas because we were trying to push that boundary as far as we could do. In Daniel's year, where we were losing thousands of councillors, you probably do retreat to your areas to try and get as much of your core vote out as you can to try and just get you over the line by whatever measure. It also depends how many people you've got, how long you've got to do it, because in an ideal world you canvass everywhere. And then if you've got limited time, do you pick certain areas? Do you pick postal voters? Do you pick people who regularly vote in local elections, etc., etc.? So you have to make that judgment. But every conversation can make a difference, and that's the key bit. Over the years, the best canvassers I've seen treat it a little bit like a children's savings account. Do a bit often, over a long period of time, and when it comes to election day, you'll be very, very grateful because the pot will be much, much bigger.
And I can always remember, and I'm sure you can, Daniel, as well, canvassing with this man. You finish the session, and then he has a catchphrase, doesn't he? Let's just do one more road.
One more road, yeah, one more road. That's absolutely it.
Well,
it works.
Daniel knows how important that is, because if I remember rightly, your count wasn't until the day afterwards. So they verified your vote on the Thursday night. And what did you think was happening on the Thursday night?
I was pretty certain at that point I'd lost. One of the polling stations in particular were disastrous for us. And yeah, it was a nerve-wracking experience and not much hours sleep, that's for sure.
But you won, and the canvassing played a major part in that, we know. So
I wouldn't have won without it.
And probably in all the years, 25 years of doing local election results, probably the most relieved person I've ever seen at a count, because having gone to bed thinking he had lost. And, you know, Daniel loves being a councillor and loves representing his community. That night, thinking it was all over, and then suddenly we got him over the line. He was a very, very relieved man.
There were a few tears shed. It was very good.
Good.
well done, Daniel. Thank you very much indeed for sharing your thoughts about canvassing and why it's so important. We appreciate your time.